Hey there, Screamers. We have a special episode for you today. Earlier this week, the Fort Worth Film Club was host of the Fort Worth premiere of The People's Joker. Before the screening, Jason and I sat down for a brief conversation with the writer, director, and star of that film, Vera Drew. That conversation is presented here. Also in this episode is the recording of our post-screening discussion panel with members of local LGBTQIA groups. It was a special event, and we thank everyone who made it possible. We'll be back next time with more opinionated movie talk. But until then, thank you for listening, and you know what else to do.
This is why you're here, so I don't forget to do important things. Vera, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this wonderful, brilliant film, The People's Joker. I would like to just kind of jump in, and I know you've answered this question like ad nauseum.
All that questions already been taken with your interviews.
Yes.
Yeah. Like we're just going to talk about cat videos and like your favorite like bread recipes.
Yes. We're going to crib off of everyone else and then ask about cats. But no, I know you've talked about this. I know you've talked about this ad nauseum, but could we touch on the TIFF incident and sort of the reaction to that and TIFF's then reaction to supporting you as well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am so sick of talking about it, but I'm finally in a place where I can actually I have perspective on it now. I think for so long, like even when we were like starting our theatrical run, it didn't feel good to talk about it because it really hadn't settled in yet. That the movie was out there. Like I was still going into that theatrical run thinking that at any minute I'd hear from David Zaslav, and which is a name I'm technically not allowed to say. But anyway,
I don't like
I like basically, and I think the reason I'm like more comfortable talking about it now too is just like I said, like I have that perspective, like, you know, we got this letter from Warner Brothers that, you know, Warner Brothers has never spent any money trying to bury my movie. They've only really sent like angry letters and angry emails and, you know, strongly worded intimidation correspondences. And the first one I got was the night before we were supposed to premiere at TIFF, which was, I mean, so intense for obvious reasons. I think namely just being like, I think we were out celebrating that night. Just that like we had our first press day and we're like, cool, I guess it's happening. Like we're going to be screening the movie tomorrow. And then I got like that call that, you know, I wouldn't even say that I was dreading it just because I always assumed that they were going to ignore us. Like, it always seemed to me like if they had paid attention to me at all, it would have just given us a lot more attention, which it did. But yeah, I was like devastated that night. And thankfully, you know, I'd never been to a film festival before TIFF. Like, that was the first time I had ever, like, forget even just having a movie in a festival. I'd never attended a film festival, and TIFF is just, like, one of the craziest experiences you could go through as a filmmaker and just as a film goer. Like, it's so fancy. It's huge. You know, the year that we were there was the same year that The Fabelmans premiered there, and The Whale, and, like, it was a really kind of big deal that we had gotten in. Like my first day there, I saw I walked into an elevator and Werner Herzog was just there. And it was like, what the, like, it was crazy. Just this like moment of like reality breaking. No, like, you don't even think of him as like a real person. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, and cause like I was there, you know, with like the team of people that I had brought with, and Nathan Foston, who plays the Penguin and the People's Joker, was also with me, and he's exactly like his character in the movie. The part was really written for him, so he often says things that are dumb. And the moment I saw Werner Herzog, I was like, I gotta say something before Nate does, because whatever Nate says is gonna be just like stupid. Like he'll bring up the Mandalorian or something. Yeah, exactly. So I just was like, okay, I'm just gonna be gracious. Like, I'm a huge Werner Herzog fan, so I was just like, it's so amazing to see you here. And his response was, here, I'm just a rumor. And then he like disappeared. This, yeah.
That's
so I had this like, yeah, no, it's so his response was just so mystical and like exactly what you would expect. Like, I think like the whole lead up to that night of getting that letter was this like, I don't know, like I'd spent years at that point in my bedroom making this movie and kind of not really knowing, kind of just expecting like a few of my friends to watch it, you know, like at a warehouse party or something. Like I didn't really, and I had worked in TV for 10 years, so I wasn't jaded, but like I needed moments like that where I was just like experiencing the magic of cinema, and I really got that at TIFF. And so when I got that letter, it was like, it was devastating. And I honestly, if I hadn't been surrounded by, you know, my manager and my producer on the movie, Joey Lyons, really were the only ones that kind of built me up, because like I wasn't ready to like pull the movie in that instant, but I was ready to like crawl into a hole and die. And you know, like I said, we had all been celebrating, so a few of us were pretty inebriated at that point. And I just remember being on the streets of Toronto, like, and I was pretty much in full Joker gear, but like I busted my zipper on my leather pants, so like I was very exposed, both emotionally and physically and literally. And Joey just like, he got in my face, and my producer was just like, you know what? We're here. We all got passports for this. We made this movie. They're not going to stop us. And tomorrow we're going to screen the movie wherever we can, even if it's in one of our fucking hotel rooms. Sorry for swearing, if I'm not allowed to do that.
More than better.
Okay. And you know what? We're not going to let them push you around, because you are not just a rumor, Vera Drew. And like, he called back to that Werner thing, and it was like, I just started bawling.
Full circle.
And it was the first time, I think, in my life that I really was able to just look around and go like, I have people who like want, like, really care about me, in my career, and like this piece of art we made. And it was really that like motivated us to just basically go to TIFF and just like, because the letter we got from Warner Brothers was pretty much like, they basically said like, you need to show this to anybody who wants to screen the movie or buy the movie. And so we had to tell TIFF. Of course, I think my first response was like, do we really need to? And it's like, yeah, no, we literally need to. We're now past the point of being punk. You know, so we went to Cameron Bailey, who was the head of TIFF, and Peter Kaplowski, who was our programmer at the Midnight Madness section of TIFF, and basically just showed them the letter, and they they were like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Like, either way, we're going to screen, you know, and in that like 24-hour period, because I can't stress enough, this was like less than 24 hours before I was supposed to like get on stage and introduce the movie. We ended up heisting the DCP, the like file we were going to play the movie, because we didn't know if like it would be stuck behind some sort of vault. So we did that. Like, and Tiff just like Peter Kaplowski specifically spent that entire day just trying to get through to somebody at Warner Brothers, and eventually got through. It's like that scene in Magnolia where Philip Seymour Hoffman is like trying to get through to Frank T.J. Mackey like all day, and it's like, this is the point in the movie where a guy is like trying to tell you, you know, reconnect with your son, he's dying or whatever. Like, Peter was doing that, but about a trans Joker movie. And he finally got to he got in touch with the head of Warner Brothers Canada, and I think, like, you know, just through like a conversation, it was just like, okay, like we're gonna do this. Like, we sold all these tickets, and you know, like it's protected by parody. Like, it's clearly a movie you guys would never make.
Right.
So we feel confident that we can screen it, and like it's like I said, like at the beginning of this huge answer, I think I feel better talking about it now, because I can really see just how much like everybody showed up around me in my moment of like complete and utter despair, and that was really the through line, you know, thereafter. Just the entire like festival programmers, the entire genre community really always believed in me and believed in like what we were doing with the movie, which is all you could really ask for as like a filmmaker, like who had never made a feature film before. And so I'm so thankful that like we really were at the right place in the right time. And I mean, that next day the movie went viral on Twitter. Like it was way more people found out about it because Bugs Bunny had a stick up his ass. So
right. I mean, I remember hearing about like what happened at TIFF by listening to, I think, like the people at Film Comment talk about the incident like the next day. And I'm like, well, this has to be good press at that point, right? As long as it gets screened out there. Like I said, I'm sorry. I just, I know you've answered that how many times, but what I think is kind of a shame is that not everyone knows, right? I mean, the kind of origin story of the People's Joker. So, yeah.
So how did WB
thank you for the opportunity to...
Oh. No, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. What? I was just going to say, I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk about it, just because, like, I don't get to talk about it in that full detail either that often. Yeah. Like, it's you know, I think the times where it hasn't felt good is like when, you know, it was like misreported that we got a cease and desist. Like, we were never brought into litigation. We never got any formal anything. And just, you know, like it's funny because like if I was like 15 years old and, you know, wanted to make movies, I would like look at what happened and go like, that's the coolest, like most punk rock thing I've ever fucking heard. But yes. Nobody wants to be like a banned filmmaker on their first movie. So no, I don't mind talking about it, because I could talk about it with nuance and a little bit more heart now.
Right.
How did WB? And this is maybe a silly, superfluous question, but how did WB deliver the letter to you? Because then I'm picturing it like that big red hairy monster, like two of those guys just came up. And like Elmer Fudd delivered you an envelope and just like looked and stared at you.
I wish it was that cute. I mean, it was just an email to UTA and my manager, and yeah, it was also, I actually read the whole letter in our DVD. We have an interactive menu on the Blu-ray, and I read the whole letter. I've never read it because I think I'm technically not allowed to, but whatever. I like read the whole thing on there, and like that was my first time really looking at it, like after, a year or so. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most about it was just like there was no name on it, like of even who it was coming from. It was just this like faceless corporation, and I don't know, it like really highlights for me, like I don't know, like I on some level, I guess I'm a capitalist. Like I've wanted to make money off of this movie, and like I'm selling DVDs and T-shirts and shit. I'd sell action figures if I could, but that would probably definitely get me sued. And they're hard to make. But
right.
Yeah, like
I take more time.
I think like yeah, exactly. We have to make a mold. I think like the thing that this whole experience really like just highlighted for me was like like we give these corporations way too much power, and they get to just really hide behind this like faceless idea of what a company even is. And the fact that we like let something like Warner Brothers or Disney or any of these companies, there's a handful that I'm not naming because I don't want to burn bridges with those ones too. But we let them be in charge of film preservation and all these IPs and stuff. And there's a real tragedy to that, because that human element to it is completely missing.
Was there ever a moment, once all the dust settled, was there ever a moment where someone from WB or DC kind of gave you a wink or a thumbs up, said good job, or I mean, I know it's probably unlikely, but I mean, has there ever been a moment where like we were just trying to scare you kind of moment, and
but we love your movie.
But we love your movie, yeah.
Not anybody on the, definitely not from the legal department, but I know, like the Harley Quinn writers room like is obsessed with the movie, and I'm friends with a handful of them. Like I was taking meetings at Warner Brothers while I was making the movie, and I was always talking about this movie, like in the lead up to it. Like I was always like, hey, I'm making this thing over here, and anytime I tell an executive, they'd be like, yeah, it sounds cool. Like can't wait to see it. And
no one once said, hey, we might be angry.
Yeah, no, nobody ever did. And I think just because like it really was just like oh, it's such a stupid movie to get mad about. Like I get it, it's good. Like it turned out good. I'm a good actor in it. I sing beautifully. It's well shot and directed. It looks beautiful. It's groundbreaking as far as DIY independent cinema goes. It's going to create an entirely new generation of filmmakers. And it's a movie that is really fucking stupid. Like it's annoying. It's rude. There's a character named Suicide Cop in it. Like it's a really dumb movie for $1 billion corporation to get mad about. Like it just is like, so that was the thing that was always shocking to me, and I think kind of just like everybody in the industry, especially, especially my agents. I don't know why I keep mentioning them so much. I guess just because like they were such a factor in this. Like the whole lead up to us releasing the movie back in 2022 and like trying to start our festival run. It was like that meme of like all the like Spider-Mans pointing at each other, where it's just like we all were like, this person says it's cool, this person says it's cool, this person, and like, yeah.
So you've mentioned punk and DIY a few times during this conversation. This film is really kind of a collage and pastiche, and at times a construction paper cutouts. Was that intentional? Were you conscious of that kind of mix of materials and technique, or did some of it just kind of come up by happenstance as you were doing, like happy mistakes wise?
It was always, the plan was always to really have this like mixed media aesthetic and employ as many different animation styles as possible. kind of to complement the fact that it was also like pulling, as you said, like a lot of different like pastiches from pre-existing DC things and just genre movies and in general. Like the movie really is like there's so much of it that's just like ripping off Goodfellas and like Casino and stuff. Like, and that was just because like Todd Phillips rips off Taxi Driver and his, so I wanted to like go to 90s Scorsese in mine. And like I think the like mixed media approach was like an early idea because the movie really did start as like I tried to sort of make a found footage movie. Like I was going to re-edit Todd Phillips' Joker and sort of just make like a big feature length experimental film. And as I was doing that, it was like, well, this would definitely get me sued. And this is like also like going to take so much time. I'd rather just like finally make a movie. Like I had wanted to make a movie since the time I was like 6 years old. So I went to my co-writer Brie LaRose, you know, who really I couldn't have put the script together without her, and was kind of just like let's really write a movie that is kind of impossible to shoot, you know, like kind of like really write a movie that like is like has the scope of like a big budget comic book movie. You know, I think it's why sometimes I get a little annoyed with people on Twitter, and I mean, which is just a sentence that could stop right there. But specifically,
shocking.
yeah, the like sometimes I'll see people say like the movie looks like shit, or the movie like it looks like a nostalgia critic video or whatever, and I'm always like, it's A, it doesn't, and B, like it's a movie where like a fucking mentally ill, recovering drug addict trans woman was able to make a Batmobile chase. Like, we really knew what we were doing. Like, we were trying to shoot for a story that a first-time filmmaker wouldn't put on screen. Like, I didn't want it to feel like how most queer movies feel, like where they're a lot slower and they kind of like I wanted it to feel like a big genre movie. So the mixed media approach was always like to sort of capture that like found footage remix aesthetic and just like accomplish that. And you know, I put out a call. I mean, speaking of Twitter, the only good thing that ever happened on Twitter was I put out a call to anybody who wanted to help us make the movie, whether it was like artists and actors and musicians and stuff. And I was kind of only expecting like 12 or so people, and it was like literally like 10 times that. Like I woke up to an inbox just like 200 people, like all who not only like wanted to just see this movie, but like were like, I've wanted to make a Batman movie my whole life, like let's do this. And so like I had this just like huge diverse group of aesthetics to kind of pull from, and I think like when that moment hit, it was kind of like, okay, I have to do this. Like I can't think of any filmmaker in the history of cinema that's ever had this opportunity to like work with this many people and on this level and in this way. And I think like going into the process, it was pretty intimidating just because like it is like a lot of different styles. Like we do stop motion, we do 2D animation, both in the style of like the Bruce Timm Batman animated series aesthetic, and there's like a love scene in the middle of the movie that's like very like twee kind of anime like animation, and then you know very experimental stuff too. And like I really kind of just wanted to prove to myself as a fan of like genre movies and like experimental film that it was something that would work. And I think there were a few precedents that I was able to turn to. I think one of them being Natural Born Killers, just because that's a movie where like you'll have like one shot will be like 16 millimeter film, and then the next will be like video, and then the next will be like 35 mil. So like, and your brain is able to just process it because we've destroyed our brains with the internet and MTV and prescription drugs. So like, it's all, yeah, exactly. That like kind of flow would always sort of be there. And I think also just the sort of like emotional experience of something like Pink Floyd's The Wall, where that's a movie that's just all about a dude in a hotel room on the lead up before like he's supposed to get on stage, and like we know everything he's feeling, and that character never talks in the movie. Like it's right. Just because we go into these like animated scenes and all that. So like I think I was just kind of looking to these things as like sort of like aspirational marks that we could hit, and knowing that like, well, if they could make it work, we could sort of make it work. And I think it was just a matter of really leaning into our limitations aesthetically and making it an aesthetic itself. The other big kind of guiding light was Twin Peaks: The Return, just because that's a show where like, I mean, I think it's one of the best things David Lynch has ever made, because he didn't have a lot of money to make it. So he really turned this like low budget shoestring cable network like resource well into an aesthetic on the show, and like was also able to prioritize things. That's why like there's like some VFX shots on that show that look like really, really lo-fi, like early right. generation CG, and then there's the nuclear explosion that's just like the most gorgeous VFX shot that ever existed. So I really was kind of drawing on that as well, and yeah, I also just didn't micromanage any of the aesthetics that we were pulling from. I really encouraged every artist to just sort of fully lean into what their artistic vision and their voice was. You know, like I had these set ideas that I would give people and be like, okay, here's like what I'm picturing for, you know, this sequence or that. Like, I mean, specifically like our version of Gotham City, like I was really pulling from the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, that real like kind of model look. So giving that to Ben Granger and Jake Myers, who were the two artists that really pulled that whole thing together, you know, they took that as inspiration, and I think it does kind of capture that, but it also has just this whole other look to it. It just has like, because it's their thing, and I really right. wanted that. I wanted it to have this sort of like collectivist aesthetic that wasn't micromanaged by whatever I was picturing when we wrote it.
We first came to the film, we saw you at the Texas Theater in Dallas, and it was such cool. a transformative experience watching this with a crowd of queer people and allies. You know, it was a powerful experience for us, and just watching the film was great, but then watching the audience reaction afterwards, and really a testament to you, their how they're drawn to you. Did you have any inkling really when you were putting this together about how needed this film would be?
No, I mean, I knew how much I needed it. Both in terms of just like I had, you know, when COVID like erupted in early 2020, and I don't know what this says about me, because, you know, I think some people that happened and they were like, oh shit, I gotta have kids, or oh shit, I gotta get a divorce, or oh, I'm gay or whatever. And like for me, like I or like I'll miss my family. None of those things came into my head. I was just like, I never made a movie. Like, what the fuck? I never made a movie, and I've wanted to make a movie since I was 6 years old. Like, I knew I was a filmmaker before I knew I was a girl, and like, I got so scared, and I really knew the second that happened that was going to be the year that I started making my first feature, just because, like, I mean, just even in the pragmatic sense, nobody was hiring me to do anything. Like, I really, there was nothing being made alternative comedy really wasn't considered essential work, rightfully so. If anything, like it's destructive to society. So like I knew that I would have a lot of free time, and I think like when that kind of clicked, I was like, what's a movie that like I needed around the time that I started wanting to make movies, and it was like a queer genre movie, and like I'm not the first one to do that. Like Greg Araki made queer genre movies, like Bruce LaBruce too. Like he's a pornographer and definitely like leans into camp and stuff. But I've always considered him like a genre filmmaker. But I really wanted to make one that was like a 2020s like genre movie, while also sort of telling this sort of like timeless coming of age story, because to me the trans experience is the perfect representation of like a coming of age story. Like trans people's journeys, I think the most frustrating thing that like when interacting with cis people who like, it's not even like the cis people who don't get it, but like the ones who like freak out or whatever, or think like our lives are so different. It's just like it's not that different. We all have to come of age. I think just in the case of trans people, for a lot of us, it's externalized, and it's embarrassing for that reason, because we have to do it like publicly. So like to me, it was like really coming from this like place of like personal, like this is a queer movie and a genre movie that I would have needed when I was like wanting to make films, and making something that just kind of showed that. And I was never, I never could have imagined the response that I get from trans people and just anybody that like watches the movie and really gets something out of it. Like I really thought I was making a movie for myself and my friends and the people that were working on it, and that we'd like screen it once and have a few laughs, and then that'd be whatever. So when that happened instantly, like that, after that first TIFF screening, the first interaction I had with somebody after a screening, it wasn't even a trans person. It was the mother of a trans woman coming up to me and saying, "Thank you for making this, because like I feel like I understand how to talk to my daughter like more now." And it was like I just fucking burst into tears, because I was like, that's so crazy. Like I would have never thought that the movie could reach somebody on that level. And the fact too that like I think so many of the fans of the film and the people that are like really into the movie and now discovering not only this film but like my previous work, so many of them are like really young trans people. Like I really thought I was making something for like, all the chain smoking 30-year-old trans women like me, but thank God the Zoomers really clicked for them, and that means the world. And I think I also didn't. Sorry, I'm so caffeinated, so I'm not letting you guys get a word in. But anyway,
no, we're here to listen to you.
No,
yeah, I never like thought that would happen, and just because like I'm a person who's been through a lot, and just aside from the things described on this conversation, but like I wasn't always able to show up for those conversations. Like when people would come up to me, like I've had so many people come out to me after screenings, or people crying who like they're not even really able to say anything. Like they just like want to have a quick hug and sit like, and just like ground themselves in the fact that they experienced it. Like in the beginning, it was a really intense thing for me, and I really had to like show up for myself through that, because it was uncomfortable at first, and now it's my favorite part about screening the movie is getting to watch those reactions and getting to have those conversations afterwards. And especially in places like Texas, we just screened the movie in oh my God, where was I? Arkansas. I just screened the movie in Arkansas. No shade against Arkansas. I've just been too many places now, so I can't remember. But that was a place where it was like, we screened it, and like every interaction I had afterwards, I was like, this is like incredible. Like, this is why this movie should exist, is for like people who live in places like this. Like
100%.
I have it pretty sweet in LA, and my friends in Brooklyn have it pretty sweet there, and the fact that like I get to bring this movie to places where like it's a little bit harder to be visibly trans or visibly queer is just it feels very holy and is humbling for me. I really feel good about it now.
We were talking off mic about Iraqi, and we've been diving into his filmography. But like, one of the things I think that he was able to do was to capture the emotion of the time when he was putting out films and putting out queer cinema that kind of normalized the queer story. And I really do think that The People's Joker, what you've done with The People's Joker, and this is not really a question, this is me pontificating, so I apologize. But what you've really done with The People's Joker is provided a film that does what Iraqi has done, for the trans community, which is normalize that story. Like you said, make it our story rather than their story. And you've also wrapped it in a bubble that is so inviting to so many people. Like, I'm not sure if you were, again, not to speak to what you were aware of, what you weren't, but wrapping it in a comic book, in a superhero story, makes it so much more accessible to those kids that'll pass this video around, and discover it throughout their own journeys. I think it's so powerful and so impressive about what you've done. And I hope that this is, a start of a movement to kind of move the trans story into those normal spaces, rather than, even like token inclusivity, where this is just, we don't think of this as trans stories. And again, I don't want to take anything away from those, but we think of these as stories being told. And I think what you've done it's just so impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something. Yeah, it's something that is like hard for me to process at times, because it like I said, so much of it was just kind of coming from this personal place. You don't really, and I don't think anybody, when they're making anything, should really think about like the historical context or like their place in even a film movement. Like, I didn't have any trans films to really compare this to, like, as I was making it. I think like the closest thing I had was like, I was thinking a lot about Desperate Living, the John Waters movie, just because like it's not necessarily good for queer representation. It's a very ugly queer movie, but like it reminded me more of my friends than most queer movies did and do. So like it really like those were the things I could only really look towards. And it's made, I think, with that in mind, like sometimes it's made because there have been a number of trans movies that have come out this year, aside from mine. Like, I saw the TV Glow and Stress Positions, and Alice Mayo McKay has 2 movies out this year because she's just like a Terminator. I'm just obsessed with her. She's my favorite director. So sometimes like I'll get asked like sort of these questions that are like in the context of a trans film movement or something, which also kind of reminds me of the Greg Araki thing of just like the new queer cinema thing, and like thinking about how like irritated he must have felt at times when it's like he's not hanging out with like all those other filmmakers and stuff. And like at first when I'd get asked the question, I'd get really like, I guess, kind of defensive, just because I'd be like, well, I don't even know these people. Like I'm like, Alice is one of my best friends, but like that happened after I made the movie and after like we met at like Outfest last year and got really close after that. So sometimes I'd get really defensive about it and kind of just be like, well, we're not like having meetings at Jane Schoenbrun's house or whatever and like coming up with a trans agenda. It's literally like a quote that I've said. But I think now it's like again, it's like if I really put myself in the shoes of somebody who is just starting out, it would give me so much hope. Just finally seeing that there's visibility and opportunity in indie and genre spaces for us, because that didn't exist when I started making this movie. Like we're all going to the World's Fair wasn't even out yet when I started making this film. Like there was no like context for what like millennial trans cinema could look like. Or in Alice's case, Zoomer trans cinema, because she's a wonderkind, definitely the Mozart out of all of us. And like, I really think, yeah, like I can look at that now in this like place of gratitude where I'm just like, I'm so glad that like up and coming filmmakers have all of us to really like point to and go like, okay, they're doing this, so I can do that. Especially in a world where like, I mean, it's very hard to like get into the industry even if you're not trans. Like it's just a really, in so many ways, like digital film or digital cinema itself really did kind of democratize filmmaking, but it also made it so much more accessible. The landscape is just so much bigger. I think I was coming into like the indie scene really with this like sort of like warped vision of like early 90s indie cinema and like what it looked like for like Kevin Smith and like Quentin Tarantino and stuff. And it's like, I don't even know if it looked like that, the way we think about that. I don't even know if that really was what it was like then. Like, I think that might have just been like Miramax PR to some degree of how like accessible indie film was. Like it's really hard, but I have a lot of hope. Like I don't really buy the whole like movies are dying or cinema's dying thing. Like I've just met too many filmmakers in the last year who are making really fucking cool shit that I'm nothing but hopeful for like the future of indie cinema and genre cinema.
Oh yeah, so that kind of leads into my next question, because I know you've said that before. So how these, and not necessarily even trans stories, but how do you feel like, I mean, like, are these people just making them in a guerrilla style filmmaking? Like, we always have the question within ourselves of like, how do these smaller adult oriented stories get based? And then having this one under your belt, is it going to alter how you approach future projects? Does this make it any easier for you? Or is this just like giving you confidence? Like, I've made the People's Joker. Now all of these things that I have lined up, I can do whatever I want.
I think so. It's funny. Thanks for phrasing the question that way, because sometimes people will be like, it'll never get better than this, right? And I'm like, better than like the hardest 4 years of my goddamn fucking life? I hope it gets better. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like it's definitely opened some doors for me. I have a film that is in development right now called Dead Name that I got paid to write. And that's a cosmic horror coming of age movie about doppelgangers and cults and stuff. And that's a movie that I had that idea had been in the oven for like almost a decade. Like I was pitching that as a TV show like a few years back, and it was just like to deaf ears. Like people are like, what the we don't want to like make a show about goddess worship and like Freemasonry, and B, like there's too many trans people in this, like we can't do this at this point. So like I think just the fact that like I'm getting paid to write that is really helpful, like and like makes me hopeful. And, you know, I still got to pitch stuff. But I've gotten attached to another script that I didn't write that's like a horror heist movie that's pretty cool, and hopefully I can talk about at some point. You know, like I think the other thing it wasn't just like opportunities that like came out of this experience, but like I learned a lot. And like I think the two things I learned the most were like I really need to take care of myself like in this process, because I burnt myself out so many times making the People's Joker. Like it really it could have killed me. Like I think it could have, just based off of like how like alcoholically I was making the movie at times. And like I sort of also would lie to myself and be like, well, this movie's my therapy. This is helping me understand things. And it's like, filmmaking is not a substitute for therapy. It's not a substitute for like gender health. It's not a substitute for drug abuse treatment. It is just filmmaking. So like whatever I do next, like I think I'm gonna really try to just make my priority like taking care of myself and my body and my brain, so that I can keep making things. And that's like also just like an example I want to set, just because sometimes I see these no shade, but I meet people after screening sometimes that are watching the movie and they're just like on so much goddamn ketamine or acid or whatever, and I'm just like, oh my god, like what have I done? Like what type of person have I emboldened by being this publicly messy? Like I really want to show that like when we make art that is this vulnerable and honest and ambitious, like we've got to take care of ourselves. And along those lines too, like whatever I do next, like I have a few things that I'm working on, because I don't want to put all my energy into one thing like I did with the People's Joker. Like I don't really know what my next movie is. I have a general idea it'll be like one of these things, but you know, like I have these two things that I'm writing with studios, and then I have my other ideas that like, okay, well if those don't get made, like I have a, you know, like I just started writing a romantic comedy about cannibalism that is 0% autobiographical, just for the record, as to not get wrapped up in any Army Hammer stuff. Yeah. But yeah, you cast a wide net. I think that's the best, I guess, right? Yes, yeah.
You've mentioned, so the People's Joker is a kind of superhero comic book genre film, and you've mentioned horror a couple times. And you know, we've seen films like I Saw the TV Glow and We're All Going to the World's Fair, and even I guess, you know, Cuckoo to a certain extent, and how these genre films also act as like living, breathing metaphors, or I guess not in a negative term, but like a Trojan horse, right? To carry these other ideas. I don't know. I mean, do you kind of see things that way? Like it's easier to tell this story kind of in a slant way or through that visual metaphor? Or are these kind of really like reclamation projects of the genre itself?
Well, I think I mean, speaking only for the People's Joker, like I know it really was like on some level, like I really needed a queer comic book movie to exist. Like I because of how like queer coded Joker itself is, like it was just like, this is actually like upsetting that there hasn't been anything like this yet. So like there was a little bit of reclamation there. And I don't know, like I think as far as just like general genre cinema goes, like I just think it's more interesting to say something through characters and archetypes than it is to like, you know, sort of make something that's just somebody sitting there and like telling you how you're supposed to feel about things, which is unfortunately like what a lot of movies are like, even movies that like pretend to be genre movies, or horror movies or whatever. Like it's I don't think you should ever like really be seeing the thesis statement of like a filmmaker through whatever they're making. You should feel that emotion and maybe like what they're saying about themselves or their family or society or whatever. And I just think genre has always been a place for that. You know, you even think about something like Alien, like the original Alien, as really being just this like kind of like Lovecraftian, like anti-corporate commentary about like sexual assault and birthrights and stuff. Like all that stuff is there. I don't know if Ridley Scott was like super aware of it, or Dan O'Bannon and the other guy. But I like think they, on some level, it's like, I don't know. I think there's like a magic to it. It's why like I really do think of like not only like comic book movies as myth, but just genre as filmmaking is sort of like the closest thing we have to modern myth. Because if you are just making a movie and you're making a genre movie, like I always think about this quote that Quentin Tarantino said once, where he was like, if you love movies so much, you will have no choice but to make a good one. And I think that's really true, especially like when it comes to genre movies. If you're really like just focusing on the fact that you're like, I want to tell a story within this voice, and I want to honor the characters in an authentic way and make something that is just enjoyable for people to like sit down and watch for hopefully 90 minutes. Like every movie should just be 90 minutes long, in my opinion.
Right.
Or 4 hours. A movie should either be 90 minutes or like
90 minutes or like right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think like it just makes it a lot more accessible, and yeah, I want to see more like queer people do that. I want to see more people of color like work in that space. Like I just remember like when Get Out came out and like Jordan started like making like horror movies, I was just like, Jesus, like thank God, like this finally fucking exists. Like it's crazy that it took that long. But you know, I really see that something that's gonna hopefully continue.
Shifting focus a little bit. I was reading in your AMA and on Reddit about your love for Neil Breen. And I was wondering, have you ever heard of a filmmaker named Douglas Burke out of USC? He made a film called Surfer Teen Confronts Fear.
No, but that I'm adding it to my watch list right now. Surfer Teen Confronts Fear.
Yeah, we'll connect. Maybe I can connect with Frank through alternates, and I'll get you a link to watch the film. But it is, and again, I know this is a complete, but it's this professor out of USC. He's a physics professor who was filming his son. He'd taken all his B-roll of his film surfing, and he was going to enter it into like local short film competitions, but decided to put the narrative around it. And it's all about, it's got this metaphysical journey that meets the Bourne Identity, and it's all about his son, who clearly does not want to be in this movie. And the plot role is that the son is a surfer. He's the surfing teen who has crashed out on a big wave and no longer surfs. And he's fishing one day, and he catches a reincarnation of his father, who sets him along a path to find his heart again to surf. And then it turns into this like espionage military movie. It is bonkers in all the best way. And if you love Neil Breen, definitely seek out Surfer Teen Confronts Fear.
I'm sold. Yeah, like it definitely sounds like it has that Neil Breen thing where, like, I don't know, like sometimes whenever I hear people talk about Neil, I'm like, are you watching the same movie? Because like to me, it's like there's this real like psychedelic, like esoteric quality to all his stuff that's very like it gets me thinking about like what actually is reality. Like and that's what this also sounds like. Please send it my way. I'd love to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Anything else? Go ahead.
No, I mean, thank you so much for talking to us. Oh, I did have one more question. Sorry.
She thought she was going to get out.
I know. All right. It's a short one.
Oh,
and
it's
this
okay.
is more of a physical. This is more of a physical media kind of. But so you have you did the interactive Blu-ray menu structure, and you have a VHS release for that. How involved were you in the VHS? Because I'm really impressed that they put out a 4:3 pan and scan VHS of the People's Joker.
I panned and scanned it myself. It was really like working with Altered Innocence on our physical media was like it was really the thing that like when I met Frank Jaffe, who is Altered Innocence, like Altered Innocence is just Frank, and that's it. Like
it was so
like,
surprising just to get like an email just from Frank. Yeah, it's great.
Oh yeah,
Sorry,
no, he doesn't have. It's. I wish he'd hire some people. Like it really, but it was the thing that made me want to work with him. Was just like, here's this like, it's like a human interaction. It's not. I don't have to talk through somebody else. And when we met, because we met, right after the first time I screened the movie publicly again, which was at Outfest 2023, and he like texted me or DM'd me or something that next day and was like, hey, let's meet up. And, like, I want to talk to you about the People's Joker. And when I got that message, I was like, oh God, like, I'm not going to get my hopes up, just because that was like, I don't know, the 20th time I had gotten a message like that from some distributor. And he was one where it was like, I was already familiar with his films and like, was like, this is a place where this movie could really work. And I showed up to that lunch and he was really like, I think we could do this. Like I'm not afraid of Warner Brothers, and I don't think the theaters are, so let's just do this. And he also gave me this like stack of DVDs, and it was like he gave me Dressed in Blue, he gave me Wild Boys, Knife and Heart, Wild Tigers I've known, like all these like wonderful queer films. And just looking at the DVDs and like holding them, I was like, I have this just like wave of intuition and like warmth come over me, because I was just like, this is somebody who actually fucking cares about physical media and film, which is not, I mean, it's just not that much of a thing, unfortunately, in film distribution. Like a lot of people, I had so many people approach me that were just like, I can get you on a streamer. I'm like, yeah, I could get, I'm sure we could. Like, I'm not worried about that. I want this to play in theaters. I want to make VHSs. I want to make DVDs. Like, I want it on VOD. I want to fucking open up Apple and see my fucking beautiful face on there. Yeah. And like, watching, getting handed just this stack of media, I was just like, this is somebody who's going to help us like actually legitimize this. And I don't even really know that I realized what I was signing up for when I worked with him. And I mean, this is probably way too candid, but whatever, that's just my brand. Like I definitely have complained a lot about how much I've had to do. At times, but at the same time, I'm like, it's so cool because I've gotten to have so much creative control over how we package these things. Like, I remember specifically for our Blu-ray, he was like, I usually do these booklets and stuff. Like, what do you want to do for that? And I was like, I want to write an essay just about everything that's happened so far, and I want to load it up with art, like original art, both from the movie and like fan art and just new stuff, and it'll kind of be packaged like a zine. And he just says, okay, like he's just cool with that. Or when we met with Liz Purcell was somebody who we brought in to help with the DVD extras, and she really like, God, just what a valuable voice to have, just even as like a creative voice in there, because it was like her idea where she was like, this movie needs like a DVD menu. Like you need to do some sort of dumb interactive DVD menu. It only because like, my computer's about to die. I've got to change location. Sorry. I like, so she was like, let's do like a crazy like 25-minute Blu-ray menu and stuff like that. So like I just got to shoot that in my apartment. And all of the special features were very like tailor-made and that stuff. And I don't know, like working with Altered Innocence has just been great on that level, you know. Like we did the last thing I'll just drone on about is like we did this one night only virtual screening a few months ago, where really the aim was just to like screen the movie just for people to watch at home, because like it hadn't been available yet. It was before it was on VOD and stuff. And like I was very adamant that I wanted it to be structured around a wedding where I'm marrying the Joker, and which is a dumb idea. It's a bad idea, actually. Like it was a really confusing piece of marketing for a lot of people. But Frank was just like, yeah, let's do it. So I shot a fake wedding where I married a Joker blow-up doll, and like Frank Jaffe gave me money to do that. That's nuts. Like it's really just like a match made in heaven. And you know, I can't stress enough for people like the VHS and the Blu-ray, like it's really worth picking those things up, just because like we really packaged them with a lot of goodies. And I think it can really serve as just like a beacon for what will hopefully be just this kind of continued resurgence that we're sort of seeing of like physical media appreciation. Like we're not the first ones to really do that, but we're grateful to be like a part of it and to be doing so much like silly experimental shit in the process of doing that too.
Yeah. Jason, anything else that we need to ask Vera? Or
No, I just wanted to say again, thank you for your time. We are actually screening The People's Joker on the 28th with the Real House Foundation and the Film Club. We've got two local organizations. One's called LGBTQ Saves, and one is Fence Place. Fence Place is a trans organization here in Fort Worth. So we're going to have a panel after the movie's over. So thank you for providing us the opportunity to speak to this, and to introduce this film to another audience. And that's what we were so excited about when we saw it at the Texas Theater. We're like, oh, we've got to get this. Is not normally something in our wheelhouse, but we were like, we got to get this as far as like showing first run films. That is, but we need to do something with this because it's an important film, and we really want to introduce as many people as we can to it. So thank you for your time, and really this has been wonderful, and thank you for a wonderful film.
We think it's a necessary and vital piece of art. And you've been so generous today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vera. It's been really wonderful to talk to you.
I love the sound of my own voice, so the pleasure's all mine. Cool. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So thank you guys for joining, obviously. Why don't we, before we get into the film, what do you mind just going down the row and introducing yourself, who you're with, and then tell us a little bit about the organization, whoever wants to do that, each of the organizations, Fence Place and LGBTQ Saves.
Yeah. Hello. Oh, okay, it does work. I can't project like Austin.
No one can.
I know. All right, so my name is Birdie Gardner. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the program director for LGBTQ Saves. We're an organization focused on preventing suicide in LGBTQ youth by providing brave and safe spaces for these kids to thrive. And I see some of my kiddos in the audience, so.
Hi, my name is Austin Michael. Well, no, that's my dead name. Fuck.
Wow.
My name is Austin Michelle McScott, and I am a board member emeritus for Fence Place. We are Fort Worth and Tarrant County's first and only trans community center. And I will let our president of the board tell you more about it.
Hello. As Austin said, I'm the board president of Fence Place, and my name is Karina Sosa. I use they, them pronouns, and we are the only trans community-centered space in Tarrant County in Fort Worth. And what that basically means is that we host events ourselves about once a month, and then we also have partner organizations that come and use the space, and it really is a community center where members of the community, and we, of course, primarily serving the trans and gender diverse community, but basically, as Birdie was also talking about brave and safe spaces, we also endeavor to be that brave and safe space for all of the trans communities, especially here in Fort Worth.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Rhiannon, like the Fleetwood Mac song. I go by Ree, and I'm also with LGBTQ Saves, and I am the board chair and also a volunteer with LGBTQ Saves, and I love working with our kids.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Murillo. I also am a volunteer for LGBTQ Saves. I just signed up this year. I have a son who is also involved in this community. He just recently went to their Camp Haven this year, and it's been an incredible experience for both of us. So we've been very blessed so far. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all for being here. When I got to use everyone's responses to the invite, I was overjoyed with the response. And so again, thank you so much for being here, being participants with us in this. Let me just ask. I know you guys hadn't seen this film before. What are your initial thoughts?
It really cemented my belief that trans women are the best comedians. So. Immediately.
So, as a trans, lesbian, leftist, anarchist, trans woman who's a conservatory trained actress, this one hit pretty close to home. It was basically a depiction of my childhood, only slightly more depressing. And way more memes, but I really enjoyed it. I love the kind of real gritty, real like shoestring budget of it, and I loved all of the crazy mixed media. I thought it was my initial response was it was a mix between Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, and Enter the Void.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. I loved the movie. I knew a little bit about going into it, but to just witness it and everything was very cool. And yeah, it gives you like a lot to think about, like, you know, having the little one-liners. But even though the one-liners still kind of make you reflect, I was like, oh, I didn't really think about this in this way. So I think I'll be ruminating on this movie for a while. I definitely feel like, you know, if you do end up buying the movie, we're definitely gonna have a movie night because I definitely want to see this again.
Well, as a trans woman, I loved it. As a trans woman who came out late in life, I really identified with being a woman There we go.
Oh, I identify with being a woman too.
You know, with being a woman in a boy's body growing up, and I didn't know it for a long time, but so watching this, it just really resonated with me. I'm going, yes, I understand that feeling. I get it, and so I will probably buy it too.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd have to second that motion. I actually am pansexual myself, but back in the day, I wasn't aware of that word. So I liked how the film started with the nitty-gritty, and you got to see that tearing away of growth. The mother character really resonated with me. Oh my goodness, that false narcissistic support that you might get in your family, but then you have to create that boundary and have this creative outlet. It was an acid trip. We were warned it was an acid trip, and I loved that acid trip so much.
Dude, I've done a lot of acid. That wasn't acid. That was DMT.
Beautiful. Either way, Pee-wee's Playhouse nonetheless. Yes. So well done. I would definitely put it on my DVD shelf.
Yeah, and if you do want to purchase the DVD, not that I'm shilling for Vera, but it is available via Diabolic DVD. You can go out to the People's Joker. It did just have a Blu-ray and a VHS release, actually. Yes, yeah. So just we interviewed.
No laser disc.
No laser.
Nice.
They don't. It's very very hard to make laser discs these days. But it's actually in, also, you'll appreciate this, it's actually in pan and scan VHS.
No.
And Vera did the pan and scan herself. So, it's highly recommend. Diabolic DVD is the site where you can pick this up. Let's just open it up to the crowd then. Craig, can we help with the microphone, passing it out? Does anybody have any initial thoughts, anything that they want to speak to about the film? And Craig's going to help us make... so just raise your hand if you have anything you want to talk to. Oh, over here, Thea.
Aside from, first of all, I loved it. Just in general, I loved the film. I thought it was great. In general, I loved the film. I loved the vibes. I loved the just very wacky... Someone mentioned the mixed media. I absolutely loved the mixed media of that. One of the parts that personally stood out to me was I really liked the way they showed abusive relationships, and I really loved the way they showed this character coming in, and he did this initial thing to paint himself as the victim of him telling his story of being abused as a child by his father figure, and that kind of paints the rest of it as him using excuses and playing himself as the victim. He starts out in that relationship as a victim, and throughout the relationship uses that to let the abuse he puts onto his girlfriend be acceptable. And that's something I faced. I had a partner do something similar, and so I thought that was just very interesting how that was shown.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, please.
So, especially in the trans community, you see a lot of tendency towards abusive relationships. We see it a lot because simply being transgender, you feel extremely othered. So, growing up like that, you don't typically have a lot of hope in finding a normal, stable relationship. So, a lot of times, we're willing to take whatever we're given. So that was one thing that did really strike me. I feel like a lot of us have probably experienced that one crazy ex who, I mean, for me, I can even say that it was that crazy ex that really encouraged me to explore my true gender. So I agree with you 100% that really did strike very, very true.
It also kind of makes the point of how when you're first starting in exploring your identity, gender or sexuality-wise, and some of the first people you meet and potentially have a really big impact of how you develop that identity, end up being somebody or some people that you end up leaving behind because they either turn out to be abusive or just doesn't work out for XYZ reasons. And it kind of leads you to continue to reflect and kind of have that sort of nostalgia feeling, like even though you know that it's better to be apart, it's still an impactful relationship that you had, and it can leave you with a lot of mixed feelings. But in essence, like as you continue to grow and find more healthy relationships and more stable relationships, it makes you, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, like it basically helps you to grow more as a person, and that you can better self-advocate for yourself in the long term, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, to go along with what you just said, Karina, one of the things I love about this movie is the subtle nuances there. So not just this example of the toxic relationship, but the fact that at a certain point in the film, Vera almost gives him credit for being the first person to see her, even as she understands, I have to get away from this. Yeah,
that's very true. You know, another aspect as far as the lived experience of a transgender person that I saw was that early experience of recognizing yourself in super negative depictions in the media. You know, they show like a Jerry Springer knockoff or a Law and Order knockoff. And that was, for the most part, my first experience of gender nonconformity in my life. For me, the first time I really noticed gender nonconformity was the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I saw when I was 9, which probably explains a lot. But that being a young boy and having, like, for me, I didn't come out to my mom. My mom called me out. So my parents were never supportive of me up until I came out at age 33. Yeah, it's very Jesus. But my mom, when I was 6, came up to me and said, "Austin, do you want to be a girl?" And I'm like, I don't know. Literally, I said, I don't know. Because, like, I didn't, it was 1992 in Plano, Texas. I didn't know what the fuck transgender was. I didn't know there was an option. But because of that, and because of the way, like, my mom did try to shield me from my transgenderism by throwing away all the clothes that I would squirrel away like a little squirrel. So, like, that I don't want to call my parents abusive. I love my parents. But that, it was that misguided attempt to make your kid happy and give him a normal life when no normal life is lived without pain. That was a through line through the movie that really affected me as well.
I don't know, like, as I was watching it, I mean, like, pretty much like everyone, I think we always examine our childhood. We try to think about, like, what made us this way and things like that. And I'm going through tons of therapy to figure this all out. Yay, mental health, woo. But a lot of Vera's journey, even through the lens of a trans film, really spoke to me as a trans masculine person, because it's when you really start to think about, like, when you hear the terms like transgender, like, when I was young, I had no clue what that was. And even until I really got to college, I had no clue trans men existed, because all I saw were depictions of trans women. And then it's like sitting down and it's like, wow, like, I didn't hate puberty like a normal person. This was something that was really traumatic. And it's like, oh my God, the puzzles. But yeah, it was just like, I felt like a play-by-play of my life, even with the narcissistic person who was the first person who I started testosterone with. And it was just like, shit, why are we all in this, like, shitty place?
Is it Adderall?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Has it considered HRT? That really kind of helped me focus more in my life.
Okay.
Come on.
Please.
I really appreciated. I thought it was really inspiring seeing a film made by a person obviously so similar to my lived experiences, but also made by somebody who's never made a movie before in complete isolation. And I loved just seeing that it felt like it's not beholden to traditional movie-making techniques. It sort of finds its footing as it's going along, which I feel like is really kind of powerfully adds to its narrative of self-discovery.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that you brought in the idea of the lived experience, because I think that this is something this film does so well in that this might sound funny as I'm going to say it, but even through like a genre film normalizes this experience, right? It makes it, and I think that's why she used it, right? Use the sort of genre frame to tell the story through metaphor rather than just a straightforward narrative.
There's a story behind that from her, actually. Yeah. I was watching, because I'm a nerd and I do research, I was watching through a lot of the YouTube interviews with Vera, and she said that this movie started out as a bet. Because the time that they started putting this movie together was, I don't remember this director's name, but the guy who directed the 2019 Joker movie. Yeah, that guy. Had come out and said that you can't do comedy these days the same way that you used to be able to, because SJWs and Zoomers and trans people get all butthurt about it. And so she and her friend decided to do a re-edit, a recompilation of the Joker movie to make it a trans coming out story. And they started to do that. They started to write it, and they said, wait, this is stupid. Let's just do a parody and use the IP to tell our own story the way that we wanted to. So like the genre movie aspect of it actually came from that genre saying you can't do this, and as many of us trans folks, especially a good leftist, will do, is when you tell us that we can't do something, we say, fuck you, give me our rights. I'm sorry, I swear a lot. Somebody take this mic away from me.
I think the movie was really unique in its use of animation, and I feel like one thing I noticed was the way that she would make herself in different animation styles, the way she used art to sort of access gender euphoria. Do you think that visual art creates unique opportunities for gender euphoria, and are there other ways to access that?
No.
I mean, I would say yes, as we clearly just saw in the film, all the different ways that it possibly can. And, I mean, harkening back to an experience we had at Finn's Place back in May, we put together an art gallery show as a fundraiser, and it featured primarily trans and gender diverse artists. And seeing all the different styles of art that were submitted and that were displayed in the gallery during that fundraiser was really just a wide variety. Like, we kind of ended up, when we were deciding how to hang up the art itself, as people who had never done that kind of endeavor before, we kind of did sort of like start off in like very like almost realistic portrait style human figures on one end, and then it slowly kind of became less humanistic, more shape, kind of abstract, thank you, shapes, and continues, and even just more, sometimes human, but also just very much like almost disembodied, but still kind of like showcases the trans experience in a variety of different ways. Like, it doesn't have to look one specific way that is usually told in like mainstream media. Like part of Finn's Place's mission is to foster trans joy. And when you think about how trans people have traditionally been portrayed in media, like I know that the previews or the pre-show was mentioning clips about how, you know, back in the day there was codes that basically restricted how trans and queer people could be portrayed in media, just basically very negative, because they had that agenda to make sure that, you know, no one saw any type of queer joy because they didn't believe it existed. But in today's society, we see more and more depictions of what trans joy can potentially look like, even amongst the conflicts that we are constantly being fighting against, either from government or society, or even still sometimes media, because although it's slightly getting better, there's still a long ways to go as far as portrayal and representation and all that. So all that's to say, whatever mediums people decide to endeavor in order to make art, especially if the trans experience is just a wide variety, and it's all just very beautiful and very creative.
With Saves, I have an immense pleasure of working with so many of our trans youth. And like Karina was saying, and with the Finn's Place fundraiser this year, it's really great to see our youth explore their gender and how they really want to portray themselves in visual media, but also hearing in songs, poetry, written word. I know like at Camp Haven, they did a more queer version of Romeo and Juliet just to really bring around this queer joy. And it's just really awesome what we are able to create and have that joy in itself.
I think if I had one criticism of the movie, it would be that the one thing, like the one step, like trans nirvana, that was missed in this movie was joy. This world that we live in right now, especially among the trans community, and frankly the world of women in general, trans or cis, the one thing that I beg us not to lose sight of is joy. Because when you lose joy, you start to lose all the brightness from your life. You start to lose your sense of fun, your sense of play, which is what renews us and makes us further able to continue this fight and to continue to love and support others and lift people up and deal with the pain, is that we have to find joy. And yes, that can come from comedy in a way, but, you know, one of the big themes of this movie is substance abuse, which, I struggled with myself. I'm on the 5th, I'll be 7 months sober from alcohol. Don't clap. I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm saying that's a really common thing. And she treats comedy as a drug. That comedy that she does is a soma to her, to use a metaphor from Brave New World. If you've never read it, you really should. It's a great book. But that's one thing that I'm missing from this, is that I wish that should be able to be part of the trans narrative. And I think that's what keeps us healthy and keeps us safe and can lower that nasty statistic that nobody likes to talk about.
Oh, my heart's beating very quickly. So, professional cis male here. So, for me...
Did you get paid for that? We all do. It's a secret thing.
Yeah, we all know.
Shit, take my needles. Crap, I don't make testosterone anymore.
So, I couldn't necessarily relate to any of the, the actual message of the film, right? Like, the queer stuff. But, I think something else interesting about the film is its setting. Its nature is a parody. It's the people's Joker. It uses DC characters. I think that's very interesting because they don't really resemble the original characters that much. Even with little the pre-show that we watched, where they talk about how they saw the thing in the character, the thing they related to in that show or that character, and they stripped it away, or they stripped other parts away, and then they kind of just grasped onto that. It feels like an extension of that idea. It feels like taking what you related to and pushing it forward. Like, why is Ra's al Ghul, like the Lazarus Pit, old 1,000-year-old dude, a comic teacher? I don't know, but it works. It never feels like it falls flat. It works. And I think that's especially interesting with the fact that comic books, infamous, they are very rigid, they're very status quo. So a movie like this taking those characters and literally telling a story about transformation with them, I think that's fascinating. It was very cool.
Transformation.
It was an intentional one.
I'm proud. See guys, cis people can do comedy too.
There is an answer for that, because I went to the showing at the Texas Theater in Dallas, and Vera Drew afterwards did a Q&A. And that's very intentional. She talked about everything that they were doing in the movie with her lawyer and how they could get around copyright, is that each of these characters represent someone in her life. So she would say, I want to use, like, Ra's al Ghul to represent this mentor who in real life was David Lee Hart, or like this like Joker, this Jared Leto Joker is a good analog for my abusive boyfriend at the time, so I want to use this character to represent that person in my life. So they had to go through every character in the movie, yes, and take that quality out that represented the person in the autobiographical version of it. And something that I also think speaks to that and was observed by my husband, boo, sorry, is that these characters, like comic book characters, DC, Marvel, those are like our American myths now. Like, these are our Greek gods. And I think that the movie shows the importance of why these things should be public property, because everyone is familiar with them and you can use them to tell new kinds of stories and exciting kinds of stories, even after all the burnout of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Batman versus Superman doing 50 dour 9/11s. Like, you can do something new and exciting with these characters if you let other people in to the playground to tell their stories with it too. You know what I mean? So.
Got Emily up there too.
Going back to what you said a little bit earlier, Austin, about the lack of queer joy in this film to a certain extent, there was a line that stood out in one of the dream sequences with Vera and her mother, where her mom basically says, like, I knew you were a little girl, but I didn't want to trap you in womanhood.
That was tough for me to hear.
Yeah, it was tough, and I wanted to hear, you know, y'all's reactions to that line, and if you feel like the film ultimately landed on a pessimistic view of womanhood, or if there is a view of choosing womanhood as a revolutionary act.
Well, I can respond to that from my own experience. I mean, I'm a baby boomer, okay? I'm obviously the oldest one up here. But somebody asked me one time, do you think your mom knew that you were really a girl? And, you know, I had to pause and think about that because I never was interested in sports or anything like that. And she told me, said, I'm really happy you're not into sports. You know, you're not playing football and all that stuff. But the more I thought about it, I think she probably did. But I think she knew how difficult it would be for me as a woman in that time. And so she just never said anything. And so that particular line really resonated with me. I mean, my mom wasn't doing it, I don't think, because she didn't agree with who I was or anything. She just knew how hard it would be for me. And that really opened my eyes to think about the things that my mother went through growing up as a woman, and to consider now that I know who I am, to kind of put that in context and say, wow, I never realized all the difficulties that she faced. is a woman that she was protecting me from. So that's my thought on that.
So I think in this movie, you have to look at two separate ideas. So there is misogyny, and then there is transmisogyny. So misogyny is the idea of looking down on womanhood. Transmisogyny and internalized transmisogyny is the idea of looking down on the idea of being trans and a woman. I don't think, other than the typical jokes about women in comedy, I really don't think that this movie has a negative view of women. And I honestly don't think that, as far as the trans experience goes, I don't think they really make that much comment on men versus women, except for the Joker Harley Quinn debate was kind of fascinating. But that comment about the mother trying to protect her from what they would experience as a woman is a real lived experience for me. Because like I said, while my parents never expressly forbade I considered it cross-dressing at the time, I'll be honest, they would just not say anything and then quietly find my stashes and throw them away. I think that they were trying to protect me. And I don't think that they were trying to protect me from being a woman so much as being trans. Then I think that was the experience of the mother in this movie, and how Vera wrote her, is that it's one thing to be a woman, but it's another thing to be seen even more as other. I don't necessarily think it was a negative comment on women, but it's undeniable that your life as a woman, whether you're cis or whether you're trans, is going to be harder than your life as a man. Does that answer your question?
I'd have to agree. I appreciated that part. I know that the joy is important in finding who you are and your identity. That's what we need to look for, that positive that gives us the motivation to keep going. I am who I am, and I am wonderful, celebrating ourselves. But I appreciated that they put it out there. It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder. It was hard the moment we were born. There's a line in a different movie where it's, men fight against each other. They wage war against each other for power, for money. But women, we're at war, period, because we're women. Because we're women. So we know what war is like. We know what defeat feels like. And the gaslighting part where she held up the lamplight, that part where it was like, oh, it's so parody, it's silly. Oh, I'm looking at a light and now I believe everything you say, but it is like that. It is like that. And it's so scary that you see yourself up there. You're like, oh my God. Yes, exactly. And I love that part. Give me that nitty gritty and beautiful color. The color to me was the joyous part. All the beautiful splashes of color in cartoons, and I just couldn't stop staring at her fabulous makeup. But I want to see the nitty gritty. It should be shown. Even, like you said, there's more so on the transmisogyny because it's odd. Yes, we're odd. We're naturally odd, but now you're odd.
Yeah, that all of those exist. All of that darkness does exist in the world. That darkness is rife in the world, whether you're trans, whether you're cis, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. But the only way that we get through that, the only way that we pass through that alive and whole as we can be, is through balancing that with finding the joy in my life. And that's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, Jonah.
So I one relate to my parents also did the thing of like, are you sure you want to do the trans thing because your life's gonna be harder, and like, so that I feel like that kind of happens across the board. But I want to be very clear that as a trans masculine person, my life is so much easier after my transition that it makes me angry. And I do identify as genderqueer, but usually that's when I'm around trans people and queer people, and when I'm operating in, you know, the rest of the world, regular world, I operate as a man because that's what makes sense to most of the people around me. So I wanted to add that. But when Austin, you noted the part about the joy, it made me think of when she had the big transition moment when she jumped into the vat of estrogen, which is my actual nightmare. When she did that and immediately came out, the joy that should have been there was immediately clamped down upon by the trauma and the trauma dumping of, for lack of a better term, of the ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Quick question up here in relation to that. I don't need a microphone. I'm loud. I can talk.
Okay. What? No, you're good.
Oh, you stand up and shut.
No, you're good. You're good.
So, being a supporter of the community and stuff, but I don't know one thing. What is cis, and am I more or less cis because I don't know what it is?
Okay, I can answer that very, very simply. There are the two ends of, so if gender is a spectrum, you have two ends. One is transgender, meaning that you're assigned, say, male at birth and do not identify as male. And then there is the other side of the spectrum, which is cis, which is you were assigned male at birth, and you're like, dope. Does that make sense?
Got it.
Cool.
I think cis people never have to wonder if they're cis.
And there's so many people today that think it's a slur. That's like saying straight is a slur.
It's a bad word on X.
I honestly have never X on Twitter. I have honestly never.
Then you also have non-binary.
And non-binary is one in the middle.
It also goes up and down.
It's up and down.
It's really this galaxy terms. Yes, this amorphous blob. Like earlier when we were in the squiggle.
Right, yeah, the squiggle. I do want to say real quick, we were talking a little bit about like presentation-wise, and me as the non-binary person who most basically has transitioned socially, not necessarily physically, because that's not something that I intend to pursue, at least at this point in my life. You know, never say never in life. But it has been interesting because growing up, I was definitely considered more of a tomboy, in the sense of, you know, being a little bit more into sports, not necessarily, like, I hated going shopping with my mom as a kid. Like, it was the most, like, boring thing in the world. I had no interest at all in picking out the clothes that, you know, potentially wearing, like, you know, in the girl section, quote unquote. But I just kind of thought, like, you know, growing up in, like, you know, the early 2000s to, like, you know, mid 2000s, you see a lot portrayed in media, just like, oh, like, you know, the tomboy girl, like, you know, has that moment. It was just like, you know, oh, this is what a girl is supposed to be like, you know, kind of has the whole makeover thing. It's like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Now you kind of grow up into it. It's just like, when that never really happened to me, it's just like, okay, this is something that at the time I thought it's like something is wrong with me. I don't know what the hell is happening here. But as I first came to terms with my sexuality as bisexual, and then being introduced then to gender nonconformity, gender queerness, non-binary, it kind of slowly opened my mind a little bit more to exploring that gender identity of myself. It's just like, oh, it doesn't have to be necessarily just female or just male, because whenever I, like, you know, talking about, like, you know, cisgender people never really question their gender. It's like, well, do I want to be a guy? no. So it's like, okay, so I must be cis. So it's like, but still never really quite fit. So as I socially started transitioning, as like using they, them pronouns, priority using they, she pronouns, or no, she, they, then they, she, and then just they, them. And then transitioned to, started using they, he for a little bit, but then decided like, he doesn't actually resonate with me anymore. So then just going back to they, them. And then also kind of the first time that I cut my hair to the way it is now, because my hair used to be about to like the lower part of my back, and just going from that to there, just like no.
As curly as it is?
Yeah, it was a lot of hair, very thick. But no, it was great. It's just like I always kind of like make the joke that if I was into dressing more femme and like being more into makeup and like quote unquote more feminine clothes, I would be a great femme, but that's not me. I am definitely more butch and like presenting more masculinely, even though a lot of times it's been interesting to like get sort of like quote unquote mistaken as a guy, like either from the back or like from the side because of how I dress and how my hair looks. But then as soon as I talk, there's like, oh, excuse me, ma'am, and it's just like not quite right either. But
Your voice doesn't sound feminine.
I mean, in the like in cis world, it is. Yeah, the amount of times I get called. The amount of times I get called ma'am still is.
The worst amusement park ever.
But also the other thing is like my name is also still very feminine, and I don't really plan on changing it either. So it's kind of like writing the whole like in this identity that I have now is like just very much riding on like the edge of like both masculine and feminine, kind of like even blending it a little bit, and just kind of as. Even from this movie, it's still very much from the trans feminine experience, and that, but still being able to relate a bit as like, just like trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? Do I have to prescribe to this one specific track, more or less, if I do want to transition to some form of fashion? But we can, as we think we all know in life, it's not always just one like straightforward pathway. So like I was talking about, just being now considered definitely presenting more mask, but not really considering like the full other end of the spectrum as wanting to be a guy or feeling like a guy, but just kind of existing in my own sort of identity that is kind of either or, yes and, or not. It definitely can be interesting, especially again in the cis world, to try to like navigate through that. And it's, for me, still very much a work in progress.
What?
Come again? Are you from Texas? Nope.
Well, I moved to Boston actually when I was 16. But my principal was still not trans. It was Bob Weintraub in Brookline, Mass. Brookline. I lived on Dean and Beacon, and then I lived on Brookline and Cypress.
Okay, but which school is good?
BHS.
Oh, the high school.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about elementary.
Nah, I went to elementary school here. It sucked. What?
E. Used to be E.
Oh, he. Yeah, no, I had friends that went there. Yeah, I loved Brookline. It saved my life as a kid.
Yeah, and you see the crosswalks.
No, it's beautiful. It's
The
beautiful.
crosswalks are,
Oh,
yeah.
love that.
Brookline's dope as hell.
Please, yeah.
Hi, Nico.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I also wanted to take a moment to appreciate like the toxic transmasculine boyfriend. Haven't we all? I know like 10 of him. Like the moment in the movie that really stuck out to me was like when she came out to her mom, and when her mom was like, what the fuck do you mean? And like the immediate, it's okay, we can fix you. Like that's like the stories that you hear a lot about like coming out or about like either parents accept you or reject you, but like I feel like I know a lot of people and I've experienced like parents who care to an extent, but the way that they care, they have so much internalized hate and so much fear inside of them that even them loving you is going to hurt you a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yep.
Nico, that recalls to my mind a question I had earlier, because it seems to me that the dad, the absent father, right, is like not trying to confront her, right? And like obviously is not about it, but just absents himself rather than getting involved, right? So, which is preferable between the mother's ill-advised but well-intended behavior and the father's like, okay, well, I have no idea what to do, so bye. Yeah, I gotta go get some cigarettes, right?
I mean, personally, I don't think either. Like, I don't think one of those is better than the other one. No. Because both, as a child, neither one of those is giving you the support and the guidance that you need as a kid. Because regardless of whether you approve of of the way that your child came out of the womb, fuck you. You know, your kid still needs a parent. Ideally, your kid needs two parents, but sometimes that's not possible. But like, to be absent or to reject your child, either one, your child's growing up alone, and you're just going to add more and more trauma on top of already being othered, which is unfortunately an almost universal experience one way or the other. Less so nowadays. Like nowadays, with the new generation of kids, there are some fucking amazing parents out there who are going to bat for their kids and giving their kids the lives that they deserve. But back in the 90s, back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, nah, we were just fucked.
I have a question for y'all. So, for those of us who were raised by strict Southern parents, and Ma'am and Sir just comes out automatically.
I fucking hate it.
What can I do?
Okay, so there's a really easy way to deal with that. When it comes to honorifics, I hate honorifics. The easiest way to deal with it is just don't use them. Bro, like dude or bro, even that is bad. I say boss a lot. I really do. I was like, all right, boss. You know, that works. Friend, buddy, pal. All of those work. But like honorifics, they're not necessary. And honestly, growing up in Texas, I lived in Texas till I was 16, and like I told the gentleman who left, I moved to Brookline, which is a suburb of Boston, sort of. It's surrounded by Boston. New England's weird. But in the Northeast, they get mad if you call, well, not necessarily sir. Sir is not such a big deal. But if you ma'am people, ooh, they don't like it because they think you're calling them old. So like in the Northeast, honorifics are just kind of slowly being phased out. So the best way to do it, in my opinion, if you're dealing with a lot of trans folks, is to just not use honorifics. The second is, if you're curious, ask. And if you're told, listen. And if you fuck up, apologize once.
She's not one of those.
And then move on.
I raised her well.
I agree with Austin, but also as a trans Southern person, I still struggle with the yes sir, yes ma'am. I'm in very much a customer service mode, 24/7.
Master is gender neutral.
That's why I got my master's degree, Master Birdie. But it's something I think just to kind of be aware of in your language. I know that for me, I'm trying to say it less and less, but when I do encounter an older person, then it just comes right out like I was taught. But I think just being aware of it and monitoring it is a good way to kind of lessen the usage.
I'm so sorry.
Echo, I see you.
Seriously.
I was just trying to figure out a way to word this. I really appreciated how the film kind of showed the mom. It's like she wanted him to her. Sorry, like she wanted her to be a watered down trans person. She wanted to be, I guess,
socially acceptable.
Yeah, socially acceptable trans person. She was like cross-dresser, drag queen, kind of what I feel like, and I related to that a lot because my mom's not exactly like transphobic, but she, when I first came out, she was like, maybe you're tomboy, and I don't know, I just appreciated that because I dealt with that.
My favorite, sort of, to take it back to cinema, to take it back to comic book movies, one of my favorite moments for that feeling is in X-Men 2, when they go and talk to the kids' parents, and they're like, have you tried not being a mutant?
What a concept.
One of the big messages in the film is like, I'm not here to make you comfortable, right? I'm not here to make this easy for you. And this isn't about you. So yeah, it's that idea of, yeah, okay, good.
Not for you, just. So one of the things that I think is so important about this film, and I think what's so interesting what Vera did here is to kind of wrap this story in an accessible format. Let me ask you, and I think one of the things also too is that it's so important that these stories be normalized and told, specifically from the people who need to tell them. What would a film like this have meant to you if you had it presented to you at a younger age?
I don't even know if I could explain the amount of joy that I would have felt seeing this movie at a younger age, because just watching this whole film, I understood every moment. I understood, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great, because growing up and not understanding what I was feeling, not even knowing that there was a word for it, it was very isolating. And I was talking to my brother. We get into these philosophical talks, but he lives in Japan now, and so I was just kind of talking about what's going on in Texas, because yay, Texas. But he was like, yeah, I noticed when you started testosterone and you started going by Birdie more, how more open you became, and how I really got to know you as a brother versus how I got to know you as a sister. And so I think just having that access would have made me a whole lot closer to my family, because I could actually be myself.
What?
I don't know.
For me, in the time that I grew up, I felt like I was a girl from the time I was about 2 years old in my grandmother's kitchen, playing with her pots and pans, just doing what she was doing. But in that time, you weren't even supposed to think about that, much less talk about it. And I didn't know what to do with those feelings. And off and on, I felt like I was a girl or wanted to be a girl at different times, and I suppressed those memories. And so to answer your question, if something like this had been out when I was growing up, I think that would have triggered me to say, wait a minute, let me think about this. But I didn't. And once I finally did come out and, embrace who I've always been, going back to what you were saying about joy, Austin, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my entire life.
100%.
And absolutely. And one thing that's happened, going back to your question, all of a sudden, all these childhood memories have come back and they've been unlocked. And I'm remembering all these times that I'm like, wow, that was a marker on that trail. I just never connected the dots. I didn't realize who I was. And so, I'm glad that there's something like this available for younger members of the LGBTQIA plus community now to say, hey, it's really okay to be who you are. And this is a shared experience. I mean, we're all talking about things that we've experienced in our lives that, in our lives have intersected in those experiences, even though we're all walking different paths, different identities. We can identify with a lot of what was in this film. So I think it would be very, very helpful, or would have been very helpful to me if I had seen something like this as a child or as a youth.
For me, for one thing, I would have been very disturbed by this movie because I was a really big fan of Bill Cosby. But in all seriousness, I don't know that this movie could have existed in the early 90s. I try not to think about my regrets in my life. But if I have one regret, it's that I was too scared to do this earlier.
Yes.
And I would like to think that if I had been exposed to a movie like this, then seeing that solidarity and seeing myself in that character might have moved me towards transition earlier. But honestly, I don't know if that's true, because going into medical transition is one of the most fundamentally terrifying things that you can imagine. And they tell you that, and it's true. It's one of the most joyful things that I've ever done. But pulling that trigger is to start fundamental changes in your body that are irreversible. And that's a terrifying thing, and it doesn't change the existential consequences for your family, for your extended family, for your life, for your career, for your friends, the possibility of rejection. That's what kept me from transitioning, not necessarily representations of transgenderism in the media. So while I would like to say that if this movie had existed earlier, it would have had a really positive effect on my life, I just don't know that that's true. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I forgot where you are.
yeah, 100%. Any last thoughts? We probably have time for one more. Barry.
I'd like to ask who did the music. The music, I thought, throughout the movie was very uplifting, very positive.
I know she did Party Girl, and then I think it was just a variety of her friends that when she, yeah.
I can look it up for you real quick.
Right, we'll Google it. It was. Well, again, let me say thank you for being here, for being candid, and for taking part in this. We created this space, and I say that as collective here with all of us, but we created the Real House, we created the Fort Worth Film Club to have events like this. So the fact that you participated and made it such a special night, we can't say enough. So thank you so much for being here, and we hope that you come back. But thank you for tonight. This was wonderful.
And thank all of you for being here as well. All of you that were here before, and all of you that stuck around, because you made it a special evening as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Deep down inside I want to cry and weep myself to sleep. Aww. See, Gotham's dark and dirty and not to sound forlorn. I'm sad to say, though Batman's gay, he's a closeted warlord. So mixy, mixy with the powers that you wield.
Here we go.
Spread light into my darkened world and make my smile real.
Oh, all right. With the wave of my imp hand, I'll make your city clean. You'll do comedy legally, the streets will be less mean. Where clowns will get the help they need without all the guilt trips from the
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you're in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.